Exactly. So welcome everybody. It's really joy for us to welcome you today in this meetup of the German-speaking WhereScape user group. Today co-hosted with WhereScape as well as IT-Logix, where we're going to discuss about WhereScape together with or in combination with Microsoft Fabric. My name is Raphael. I'm leading the WhereScape or the German-speaking WhereScape user group. And as you can see on my welcome slide, it's already the 20th meetup we have here. So we meet regularly, maybe every 2 to 3 months to have a thought exchange, look at new features in WhereScape or discuss practical examples and challenges we face in our everyday data warehouse automation life. So together with me is Elgar from IT-Logix as well as Endika from WhereScape, and we have prepared the following agenda for you. So after my very short welcome introduction, Elgar is gonna give you an introduction. What is Microsoft Fabric all about? Maybe for those of you who are not that familiar yet with this, yet another label or brand in the Microsoft universe. Then Endika is, because I think that's the most, let's say, interesting thing I'm gonna looking forward to is always the live demo. So Endika prepared something to show you, okay, how does WhereScape work? Combination with Microsoft Fabric, how can we use that, leverage the automation power of WhereScape to be more efficient working with Microsoft Fabric. Then switch back to Elgar. He will give you a few insights how we work with WhereScape and Fabric, and as well what was our journey working quite, I think it's over 10 years with WhereScape, what were our experiences when Fabric first came up and how we could flexibly use WhereScape to adapt to this new platform. And I will conclude the content part of this meetup, showing a little bit more from a process perspective or project management perspective. How could a potential migration from an existing database platform like Microsoft Synapse, Azure SQL into Fabric in the context, of course, of WhereScape. We definitely will have enough time to discuss or answer questions or as well get into a discussion. So feel free to interrupt the speakers during their presentation so that we can really make that an interactive session together. But of course, we can also have some time in the end to discuss questions. And the goal would be that until around 6 o'clock we finish the meetup. I'm gonna present a few community news, especially now from the German-speaking area, what's next, both for the user group and some other communities. And so I think that's enough said for the beginning. So Elgar.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can you take over and take us on this
Yes.
road and give us a little bit insight? What is this Fabric about? Maybe
let me
quick anecdote for the German speakers. Fabric is not the same as Fabrik. It's more like Stoff or Gewebe. So there is a very similar word in German, but it doesn't mean exactly the same as Fabric.
I think, yeah, does everyone see my screen?
Perfect.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Rafi. So I wanted to give a short introduction about Microsoft Fabric, the new data analytic platform from Microsoft. Like you see here, it's the Lakehouse centric solution from Microsoft. It has been GAIA, I think, about almost a year now, I think. And it is, of course, in the era of AI. Huh? So let me tell you, let me show you what we have if we are in Fabric. So here you see the different features, services from Fabric. At the bottom, you see OneLake, which is like the storage layer, the universe storage layer, where you can hold all your files and all your tables from everywhere. You can also make shortcuts to other storage layers, like for example Amazon S3, or maybe you have some data in Google Cloud or in an Azure storage account. They can all be linked, so that the services which we are using the data for them, it looks like as if it's in OneLake. Then above you have you see the different components you have available in Fabric. There you have your data factory, which is your tool for ingesting your data, getting your data from anywhere and storing it in Fabric. If you go to the right, you see your data engineering part. This is your notebooks and for example your Python code, which runs on the Spark cluster to make transformation. You have your data science components. Think about machine learning, AI, all those kinds of stuff, all possible in Fabric. Then you have your data warehouse. This is your traditional warehouse SQL approach, where you can query your data with TSQL. Also, the data which you use in your warehouse will all be stored in OneLake in a so-called Delta Lake format. This Delta Lake is like Parquet file, but with some additional JSON, which makes it possible to do time traveling, where you see your changes in time. Then you have your real-time analytics. This is all your to cover all your near real-time or real-time requirements, and of course Power BI. This is, I think, what we all know. This is the big reporting tool from Microsoft for making it able to do normal reporting or analysis. And at the end, you have your data activator. The data activator is something where you can automate specific actions. For example, if you have like a KPI or a measure defined, and some data goes below or above a specific threshold, then you can automate maybe sending an alert, or maybe you want to execute a pipeline to do some transformation. So there you are able to really automate also specific behavior on your data. So those are the basic features, basic services that are available in Fabric to make your whole data analytics platform. If I go one slide further, you see the different compute engines that we have available in Fabric. So for example, if you are in Data Factory, or you are in your notebook in data engineering, you have your Spark engine querying the data in OneLake. And if you are in warehouse, you can actually use TSQL, which all people which are familiar with Microsoft products will know from SQL Server or Synapse. And if you are, for example, in your real-time analytics, you can use KSQL for doing your real-time analytics querying of the data. So that's all the compute engines that we have available in Fabric, and of course all based on the same data in OneLake. Then I think it's also very important to mention the product which we had 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, I think Microsoft launched, I think it was around 5 years ago, I don't know the exact date, it was Azure Synapse, which was then the new data and analytics platform. So what are the differences between Synapse and Fabric? I think I think almost all the components that you see in Fabric have somehow been migrated to from Synapse or from Azure into Fabric. So there are not groundbreaking new features. So I think also almost everything that you can do in Synapse you can also do in Fabric, and vice versa. But the big difference from my point of view is that if you are in Synapse, you have to create and manage and configure all those services yourself. So if you want to use, for example, if you want to create a dedicated pool, you have to do it yourself. You have to configure it. You also have to set network rules. If you want to use Data Factory, you have to create you have to or create Azure Data Factory or create Synapse pipelines. There's a lot of stuff you can configure, making it a little bit more powerful sometimes. but also you have to manage everything yourself. Where if you go to Fabric, on the moment you register a Fabric capacity, all those services are there. They're all configured. You don't have to do any networking or almost no networking setup. So it's a lot easier and it's more out of the box. Where signups you have to configure a lot more yourself. And of course now, so from my point of view, from future perspective, it's not very far away from each other. But what you see now with Fabric, there's a lot coming every month, and every month there's more features coming. So I think that the changes will be more and more over time. So to give a small example, last month for Fabric Warehouse, there was introduced the Git integration, so that your all your warehouse components, all your tables, your views, your procedures, everything is just natively in Git, making it also possible to have your deployment pipelines based on this Git, making it possible to publish your objects from, for example, from your dev to your other environment, for a pre-environment or prod environment, which is currently not available in Synapse. So there you see a lot of coming, and a lot of more stuff is coming. I think what's also cool to mention, by the way, is the way that in Power BI and Fabric you have the option to have direct lake modus. What does it mean? Does mean that on the moment that you publish data in Fabric in the warehouse, it will be directly available in your Power BI reports, in your Power BI data set, without doing anything. So on the moment that you set data there, you can directly use it in Power BI, which is of course makes it a lot. The time you need to get it to the end user is a lot shorter there by this feature, which is very cool. Yeah, and then maybe also I want to say also one thing about AI integration that we were talking about before, and then I will hand it over to Endika. What is also very cool is that of course Microsoft is trying to integrate Copilot into all of those services. So for example, you have Copilot available in Power BI. You also have it available already in your Synapse data engineering, where you can use Copilot. The potential there is very, very awesome, because on the moment that it will know your whole platform, it knows your, for example, your views, your tables, and everything, and you can really ask him questions about that. I think the potential is huge. But on the currently, the last time I tested it, it was still not there yet. So it's still, from pre-sales perspective, it's cool, but it's not, from my point of view, not usable yet. But I think the potentials there are huge. Yeah, that was my background about Fabric. I hope it was a little bit helpful, and I would then hand it over to Endika to give a demonstration about how to use Fabric on with WhereScape.
Thank you, Elgar.
Good.
Okay, I'm going to switch my screen now, and you can let me know when you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Not yet. Now you should be able to see, yeah, red?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to do, let's say, a short demo similar to the demos that we usually do if you have seen them, I'm going to say lately. But we will have the focus on the more Fabric sort of features. I'm going to explain a little bit how we will go on the demo first, so you guys have an overview. Okay, I'm going to show you the architecture diagram. So usually we show one of our sources that we actually discover. Okay, and we profile and we show a little bit of the profiling and how to keep track of it. That is going to be a little bit different because we will do that by checking a Purview source, or let's say a source that has been already discovered by Purview, and we will discover that source with 3D, but pointing directly to Purview. Okay, this is because Purview is one of the components that are actually part of Fabric. Okay, so we will show you a little bit of that. We'll see how to create or how we would actually create a data vault in Fabric. Okay, that is similar to our other platforms in terms that we will still use the CQL and send it via an ODBC. And we will see how that works in Red and how that actually looks on our Fabric platform. Okay, and then we may talk a little bit about how we would ingest that using maybe or data factory pipelines or pipelines in Fabric itself, which are similar but not exactly the same. Okay, if you want to ask any questions, you can always raise your hand and we will try to answer them during the demo or at the end, depending on what the question is. Okay, so I'm going to go back into 3D. Okay, usually we discover one of our connections from an ODBC, a JDBC, or a scripted connection. Okay, but there is a new feature that we have introduced especially for Fabric, which is to include an import that comes from Purview. Okay, so I'm going to go into my Northwind connection and I'm going to create a new version. I'm going to call it demo. I'm going to choose a connection here. That's going to be Northwind as well. I'm going to click on next, and now I'm going to click on cancel. And now I have this sort of empty carcass. Okay, and I can right click now and go to import. And this is the new feature that we have added to for this particular platform. It will not only work for Fabric, but any of the targets that can work within Fabric. Okay, it can be something like the Fabric warehouse, which is what we will see today, or any of the other targets that are being added, let's say, month to month into Fabric itself. Okay, so I'm going to check into, for example, my EMEA database demo and into my Northwind database, which is sitting already in my Azure server. Okay, I'm going to click on import, and that will allow me to bring my Northwind database directly from my Purview. Okay, this will work, let's say, with any of the Purview catalogs. It could be, I don't know, ADLS, it could be other files that you have on-prem, it could be any of the things that you want to integrate through Purview. Okay, now once we have imported our source, the way of doing a data vault, if you're already familiar with WhereScape, it's similar to with any other source. I am going to create a new version. Again, I'm going to call it demo. And now what I can do is get one of my tables from Purview. Usually we take the customers one. Let me display this first. And I can bring, for example, my customers. And now flag my attributes the same way as I would do with any other source. So for example, usually we do that this is our business key, and then we set a few of these as a satellite, and then maybe the other ones as a different satellite. And we click on apply. And if it will close now, I think it should be refreshed now. Okay, so now we have all our flags, okay, like with any other source. And now we would continue as usual to generate our data vault. Okay, this will pick up all the information from our source. In this case, any flags that come from Purview will be also added. Okay, so any fields that, I don't know, maybe the business or other people have actually added to our Purview catalog will also be here for us to be working with them, okay? So maybe you have, I don't know, data quality issues or GDPR or a particular kind of attribute you would like to exclude or to include. All those things can be done via Purview, and then 3D can pick up all those attributes as extended properties, and then those attributes can be used to generate a different model or to let our developers know if they have to do something specific with that information from our catalog. Okay, from this point on, it will be the same as with any other data vault. We would go back to our create load and stage. Okay, and this would be the same as we would usually do. Okay, This will create the load and the stage as with any other data vault. And in the last step, I'm going to minimize this now a little bit. We will actually specify that this is a Fabric target. And then we will change these data types and we will add those transformations before we do the red export, which is where we usually do the deployment, okay? Maybe most of you already know, this is the input for red. I'm going to jump directly into red to show you how that will look, okay? And this same raw vault is the raw vault that you're seeing here with all our loads, stage hubs, and so on, okay? The only difference is that this is a Fabric target. And this Fabric target is an ODBC connection, okay, with my database. And in this case, my username and my password. If I go into my Fabric environment, I can see that here is my demo warehouse, okay? And here is where we have picked up our ODBC string, our username, and our password. Probably our ODBC string is, I believe, somewhere here, possibly. Yeah, okay, so this is what we have added to our ODBC string. Okay, and from this point on, Red will actually generate all the TCQL based on the templates for all our objects. Okay, so for example, in the case of the load table, it will create this Python script with my extract and all the code that I need to actually load it. Okay, and if I, for example, run my customers table, this will run the script generated by Red. It will run the upload command and the ingestion command so that this is loaded into my Fabric target. Okay, for my other objects, it is the same sort of idea. And now once it has run, I can see I have loaded 91 rows. All my output is here, like with any other target. Okay, and now if I display my data, I should see, thanks to my timestamp, that I have just loaded it. Okay, this is 2 hours of difference because the server has 2 hours difference, but you can see that is today's date and just a few seconds ago. If I go back into my target, I should see sometimes the environment is a little bit slower. I may have to refresh this, but hopefully we can see on our load tables that are load customers. Was it load customers or load customers Northwind? Was it? Load customers Northwind. Here we can see the same timestamp that has translated into our target. Okay. Once we have configured this inside Red, it behaves as any other target. Okay. The advantage is that we can bring all this metadata from Purview. And if we wanted to, we could change these templates, this load template, into something like an ADF template or to create pipelines also within our Fabric environment. Okay. Once I have all my objects loaded, let's say, or created on deployment, I can, of course, create a job. Okay. That will contain all my objects. Okay. And what I'm going to do is, hopefully, this job is still running. I'm going to run this existing job. And once it starts, what I'm going to do is, now that it is running, I am going to log into my scheduler to see how that job is already running. Okay. Again, this is the same as with other targets. Okay. Okay. I have an error logging into my scheduler, but let's see if we can log in. Or we just have to see it here, apparently. Okay. Maybe we have an error on the scheduler. I think it is still running. I'm not sure why we cannot log in. But again, this is the same as with the other targets. The only difference is that the generated code is specific for Fabric. Okay, everything else works exactly the same. We have support for all the objects, including things like business vaults, for example, with a bridge or a pit. Okay, and of course, things like star schemas or a virtualized star schema, if you are coming from a data vault. Of course, all these objects are already supported. Okay, this is roughly what I wanted to show you. If you have any other specific questions, please raise your hand or add them to the chat. Yeah.
I think at least what I see in the chat, there are no questions yet. Otherwise, I suggest that we switch back to you, Elgar.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, then I will try to share again. Ah, yeah, you cannot start share, but I think you will first have to stop sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, now?
Yeah, let's try it. I think, yeah. So do you see my screen? I think so, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Endika, for the demonstration. Very cool. I wanted to show a little bit about the way we were working with WhereScape and Fabric. And first of all, I think one of the very cool things about WhereScape is that the automation is very powerful and very flexible. So on the moment that you want to change it a little bit to adjust it on your specific needs, there's a lot of options there. So the flexibility is very powerful. That's why we also came with a little bit of different solution. But before I go into the differences in comparison to what you just saw, I want to very quickly explain the default architecture or an example architecture that we are normally proposing from IT-Logix, and then I will go over on the differences. So let's go into the architecture that you see here. So from the left side, of course, you have your sources where you want to extract your data. So for example, you have your SAP, or maybe you have Nordwind or whatever. You have all sources where you want to get your data. We always have one generic pipeline per specific source. So for example, if you want to get data from Nordwind, we will have a generic pipeline for that. This approach makes it possible to, on the moment that you want to use a copy data, you can use copy data. The moment that you say, well, in this case, for this specific source, we actually need a notebook. You can actually also start a notebook for this specific source then. So for the ingest part, then you are very flexible. And this generic pipeline will then ingest the data into in the first zone, which is on the Fabric Lakehouse. This is then the landing area. From there on, the data will be loaded into our PSA. The persistent state, this is then already in the Synapse warehouse. So the landing area was in the Lakehouse, and the PSA is in the Fabric warehouse. Where the persisting staging area is just the layer where we want to make sure that the data is consistent and of a higher quality. So there we do like technical checks, like key duplication, stuff like that. If you want to, for example, also have your data historized, like SD2, like a data store history, you can also do it there. And then from there on, it goes into the EDBH, which is your dimensional module where you have your dimensions and your facts. If you want to compare it to the Lakehouse architecture with the medallion structure, with your bronze, silver, and gold, it is very comparable. Not 100% the same, but it's very comparable with bronze, silver, and gold. Those three layers that you just saw. So how are we loading the data from from bronze into silver, we are using procedures there. So we are generating procedures on Fabric in the Fabric warehouse. So it doesn't matter if you want to load like a stage table or a data store, whatever. We are always using procedures here. And that's all. Then we are coming to the differences. We wanted to have procedures there to make it possible to run all the code during the operations on the platform. That was one of the feedbacks that we had from some customers in the last 5 years when we were running on Synapse. Was that they actually want to make sure that all the code which is running during the daily business or during the ETL loads that is all running on the target platform. So that in mind, we went for this approach. So we actually only have 2 kinds of loading patterns. At the left side, you have your ingest, which is your generic pipelines per source system, and then you have your procedures for loading all the data in all the different stages. And then it is possible to do the following thing. Let me go to the next slide to round it up. So what we are doing now is that on the moment that we want to during the night, you have maybe your daily loads or maybe your hourly loads. Fabric is going to trigger like a master pipeline, which has 1 parameter, and this parameter is the name of the job that you want to execute. For example, in WhereScape, you have your job, which is called PSA Nordwind or whatever. He is going to be started with that parameter. He is going to go read it from WhereScape, read the metadata from there, and he will say, okay, I have 100 tables I have to load. From those 100 tables, I have 10 ingests and some other jobs, and then he will first execute the pipelines ingesting the data into the lakehouse, and then from there on he finds out, well, here on this part I have to execute a procedure to load this load table or whatever, and then we have generic pipelines executing all those procedures. And the only thing that he has to extract here is the names of those procedures. Yeah, that was one of the key differences, and there I think it's we wanted to make sure that WhereScape is completely in the driver's seat about the whole generation and have the powerful generation there. But on the moment that we go into operations, all the code is running on the target platform. Yeah, that's a little bit the approach we went for in with Fabric. So if there are any questions regarding this part, I would be happy to answer them.
I see one question in the chat, I think. Is a job some kind of a WhereScape Red internal thing, or is it reflected in the Fabric artifact as well?
Yes, I think I have already typed it there, but I will answer it also here. Yeah, so what you have seen is the scheduling in an Azkaban scheduler. If you want to generate something like a pipeline, you can generate that by generating the code in Red. And if you want to orchestrate it in Azure or in another scheduler, you can do that by changing the publishing script. Okay, that's only available in Red 10. It's not available in Red 9. Let's say as easily. In Red 9, the integration wouldn't be as easy as in Red 10. In Red 10, you can basically change the publishing script and then schedule or orchestrate in any other scheduler just by changing the script.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's another one.
Just switching between the, that was the chat.
But for Elgar, yeah.
I actually don't know where I have to see the question, so can you say the question?
I read it for you. The procedures, are any loading code written in Data Factory or a notebook or SQL?
So all the procedures are in SQL, yeah, and they are all in SQL and are all running on the Fabric warehouse.
Good.
Yeah, so the notebook possibilities are there, but they are there in the ingest part in our architecture.
Good. Any other questions so far? I don't see something currently.
I will
Then
stop sharing.
yes, then I'll
hand it over to you.
Exactly. Then let's come to the third part. You should see this part. So what I'm going to show to you next is an excerpt of our Azure Synapse to Fabric migration workshop, because as Elgar mentioned, just a few years ago, the new kid in town was Synapse, and Microsoft promoted Synapse as the holy grail of data warehousing, and therefore, of course, being a Microsoft partner, we also went into that direction. So we built quite a few data warehouses based on Azure Synapse. But of course, the process I'm going to show to you is rather generic. So that would work as well if you want to migrate, for example, from a on-prem, say, Oracle installation with WhereScape to Fabric. So that said, let's jump into the part. So Elgar already mentioned that a little bit about the comparison between Synapse and Fabric. So that's basically the same. You see, it's more or less an equivalent list of topics. I think the most, let's say, obvious or the most important difference is here on the, let's say, the typical database, where Synapse really was a massive or multi-parallel processing engine, whereas here on the Fabric side, we really have a dedicated lake-based or lakehouse architecture. And I think what's also important, which is interesting, that looking at Synapse, even though you already got quite a few of different components within a Synapse workspace, still it was more like putting together different services to work together. And with Fabric, we are moving even more into the domain of a software as a service, where, for example, the setup of setting up a new Fabric environment has been simplified quite a bit compared to what we've seen before. That's also visible, like Power BI so far was a, let's say, kind of separate component, different from Synapse in many ways. So for example, Synapse was based on the Azure cloud architecture, and Power BI always belonged to the Office or Microsoft 365 let's say, cloud and administration. And this has been combined, that even though we still have the name of Power BI as a separate brand, let's say it like this, from a user experience view, everything is now integrated in the same, let's say, portal or user interface, where you do not see any difference anymore. And Power BI is just one component within the Fabric environment. So on one hand, pretty comparable. And on the other hand, we have a major difference here when it comes to how data is stored and processed. Now, we thought about, okay, how should a process look like? And maybe that's another part why I think WhereScape is very useful to that. When we started working with WhereScape, one reason we, as well as a consulting company, decided for a software like WhereScape was always to reduce the lock-in effect for a specific technology provider. So having the work, or the work we do, is working in the metadata stored in WhereScape, and this allows us to generate the code which is needed for Fabric, but it's as well possible to use the same metadata to generate the code for a SQL server, for Oracle, for Teradata, etc. And even though there are the things we need to adapt, I think one advantage is that the migration to a new platform like Fabric is much more easier than when you would have built everything natively just with Synapse or with another platform. So the first step we see for such a migration is typically, okay, we need a new repository, because especially the red repository is target specific. And then, of course, we need to configure red for this target platform. So this is what Endika mentioned before. Once you have set it up specifically for Fabric and the corresponding storage accounts, etc., you're good to go. And on the 3D side, we need as well to or do some target-specific things like getting the right data type mappings, because here we have a few differences, for example, as well to Synapse and other platforms, of course. Then, as we have seen, let's assume we already have the corresponding models, as Endika showed us, that like the logical model and generating the physical model, etc. We generate the red layer in 3D with the new parameters, like the new target platform. So this is in the part in 3D where you have, let's say, where you transform the generic models into a target-specific model. Then, of course, you have to re-export that into red. And based on that, you import that into red. And now one part, when it's imported in red through the deployment application mechanism, of course, it is also deployed to Fabric. So we generate the structures we need, we generate the stored procedures we need. But what is missing there typically, at least that's the way how we work with the 3D red combination, is that business logic or the transformation logic we need, that's typically not implemented in 3D, but only in red. And this is, of course, the missing piece we have. So if we set up a new repository here, we, let's say, refill that repository based on what we get from 3D, what we already had for Synapse, any other platform. So here we need to think about how can we transfer the transformation logic, for example, as well with deployment applications. But depending on the case or how your system is built, maybe it's as well just copy paste certain things from the existing repository and environment. And then, of course, we always have some adaptation of the transformation logic, because maybe some syntax things are different, some elements, let's say some SQL statements that are not supported in Fabric but are in Synapse, or even more. So I would say Synapse, and you correct me, Elgar, but I would say Synapse is still pretty close to Fabric compared, for example, if you would migrate from a Teradata platform to Fabric. But to be honest, I'm not that much into the technical details here, but more from a process perspective. And then, of course, we have, let's say, all the structures ready in Fabric, but we still haven't migrated the data. So we need to think about how do we bring over the data from, for example, Synapse. So there are as well, again, multiple options to do that. The two most obvious ones is we could migrate the fully fledged enterprise of the, let's say, the gold layer, let's say, or the silver layer, just as it is from the old platform. Or the other option would be, especially because maybe some of the logic could change in what we've seen from the transformation logic, that we, of course, could only migrate the raw data from the Azure Data Lake below Synapse. We move that into one lake, and then we reload all the structures based on what we have in the data lake. So again, typical consulting statement or consultant statement is it depends on your context, it depends on your system and your environment, what is the best. Maybe as well, we need to do some, let's say, try and error what works best in the corresponding situation. And then, of course, don't forget the testing. I don't like the word one-to-one migration, but from an end user perspective, typically nothing should change just because we change the platform beneath it. So we can assume that if we have a certain dimension or a fact table, that the content of these structures should be the same, independently whether we are on the old platform or on the new platform. And we also we had a user group meetup when we introduced or presented BigEval as a data test automation tool. And I mentioned this here once again, because remember, or those who attended this meetup, BigEval is one of the only tools I know, at least, which can read metadata and derive test cases from the metadata. And this is very useful in this situation as well, that we can connect, for example, to the, let's say, to the old WhereScape repository or the new one, doesn't matter basically, because it should be the same in the end anyway, and then have tests run automatically to automatically detect in the WhereScape metadata, there we have a dimension customers or dimension products, and then have, for example, automatically do a row count or whatever test to make sure that we really have the same data available after all. Then last thing, coming from a Power BI world, or when Power BI is your front-end tool of choice, then of course we also need to adapt the data set settings and point the data sets or switch the data sets from Synapse or the old platform, pointing them to the new platform. And again, if you don't change the naming in between, that should be straightforward. One option you have on the Power BI side, there is a new connectivity type called direct lake connectivity, which replace or is an alternative to importing the data in the Power BI dataset. So not loading the data into your in-memory database of Power BI, but simply using, I don't know the technical details here, how it's done exactly, but where the data actually resides in the one lake domain. And at least Microsoft promises there a similar performance. If we look at first test results, for example, from Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari, Corifes in Power BI, it really makes a difference for very large data sets. And but that's also things where we are still experimenting to figure out what the best options are, etc. So that said about the process, we did some reflections first, let's say, as well, prototyping and working with customers on migrating to Fabric. What speaks in favor of migrating to Fabric is, of course, Synapse is known to generate rather high costs, and the at least marketing promise of Microsoft is that costs in the data lake or the one lake are significantly less. I personally doubt that still a little bit, because Microsoft has not too much high interest to lower their income, but that's still to be proved. What we saw in our own customer base is that actually the performance we could get from a multi-parallel processing system is not really used, especially for smaller and medium-sized environments. So you still have a certain cost for not really using that, which is a bad thing. That's also interesting that based on our discussions, we see that especially this lakehouse architecture tends to have a good performance for, let's say, rather small amounts of data if you really do all the processing and not only the raw storage in a lake. Happy to discuss this in the group afterwards as well, but if you have different experience there. And of course, if you want to first and foremost just collect a lot of data and perhaps not use or load all the data in a data warehouse, we see that as an important aspect as well. And of course, if you already have a Power BI premium capacity, you will get, or let's say the Power BI premium capacity is kind of a licensing or deployment model, and this is replaced. So this is end of life and will be replaced by Fabric capacities anyway. So when you have a Power BI premium capacity, you will have a Fabric capacity at hand anyway, earlier or later. So that would be a good reason to say, okay, if it's enough what we get from there in terms of performance, etc., then of course I think you can really have or leverage some synergies by using Fabric for your data warehouse platform as well. And don't forget, Fabric is now GA since a little bit more than half a year. So I would consider that still something to be for rather early adopters. If you consider yourself as late movers in terms of the technology adoption curve, then perhaps it's still a bit early, because we still see that there is a lot of, let's say, movement in the features of what's already working, and then again changes in terms of features. So that's the typical characteristics of a platform or a product which is not yet there for ages. Points that speak against a migration as of, let's say, today. If you really need the performance, which is still significant, I think, if you really scale up a Synapse pool, again, corresponding with rather high cost in that moment you scale. And that would be the opposite of if we say, okay, we tend to have smaller data sets, then say for data warehousing with records, let's say, an approximate number of 300 million records, maybe it's still better performance in the Synapse pool. If you don't have the need for Power BI premium capacity features, then of course that could be as well reason still to wait for that. And yeah, that's it, I think, from that point of view. Any questions or as well remarks on that topic? Oh, I missed one slide, but let's wait for the questions in between. There was one thing I missed, so then I'll just quickly switch back to the presentation. What I missed was like, okay, what are the migration scenarios we can think of? The first scenario would be a kind of a hybrid scenario where we would retain the existing environment for the time being. But of course, if we have new developments, extensions, or even just completely new, let's say, data domains we want to attach, then of course we could start that in the, let's say, in the Fabric environment and just gain some first experience without having already the fully fledged migration being in place. So the advantage is like, okay, we gain experience, have kind of a proven concept for a smaller part, and of the other hand, running two platforms in parallel will as well lead to additional costs, at least during the parallel operation of both platforms. The one-to-one migration mentioned before is, okay, we really want to get rid of the old platform as soon as possible. Then, of course, it's quite easy, because if you do this migration in a rather, let's say, short time frame, you really keep the same reports and figures as before. Testing is rather simple because you can do an easy before and after testing. But also maybe you could lose some of the new benefits of the new solution because you just copy paste. And this is rather easy, as we have seen with WhereScape before, because we have the metadata, we just regenerate it for Fabric. And of course, on the other extreme, you could simply say, okay, we just start a new development, because if the data warehouse is already in a state where you say, okay, we have a lot of things which we actually do not use anymore in that way, or we need to change business logic or whatever the requirements anyway in a significant way, then you could also just start from scratch and keep the old platform as long as you need it, but you don't change it anymore. You just go with the new one. Okay, so this was not fine. Definitely the last slide. So stop the presentation again. And here we are again. Any question? I look here. I think we got a new one in the Q&A. are PySpark notebooks and pools also generatable by WhereScape Red? For example, these are used for GraphQL APIs in our case. Can I give that question to you, Endika, perhaps?
Yes. So the short answer is yes, you could generate any sort of code that you want with the templates. It doesn't have to be Python or SQL. It could be PySpark or it could be Java as well. However, let's say the out-of-the-box templates cover the warehouse right now. So it covers all the warehousing from ingestion into the data warehouse, okay? But yes, you could generate notebooks instead of SQL. It's perfectly possible, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Also remarks. Do you have experience on your own? I'm not sure if you can unmute yourself. So Courtney, maybe at least if someone would like to speak up in the meeting, maybe write it to the chat and then we can have a look that we can hear you. If that's not the case, I suggest that I proceed with the community news. Give you a second to decide whether you want to ask something. Okay, then let's go on with the final part already. You should see my screen again. Okay, let's move on to the community news. Now, to be honest, that is maybe not that interesting for those people abroad, not from the German-speaking area, at least from a geographical point of view. But first and foremost, our next user group meetups together with Carlos and Ritz and Franziska from WhereScape and Helsana. We had our board meeting to organize the upcoming events last Monday. And we thought we're going to provide you or suggest to you the following dates. So first of all, we already discussed for quite a long time about how can we organize or should we organize a kind of a WhereScape user group conference. And as we are still like a community where we have maybe between 15 to 20, sometimes maybe 25 participants, we said we are still, let's say, too small for organizing a complete on-site conference, especially because we are distributed over, let's say, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and traveling is sometimes not that easy for you. So that's why we said, okay, let's join forces together with both WhereScape and IT-Logix again, because both IT-Logix and WhereScape will be present on the Make BI event. And as we are there anyway, and I think you, Endika, will join us in Zurich on mid of September. Franziska is not yet sure if she can join. Thomas will be there. So you will have the chance to really meet people directly. We also have very interesting people from Microsoft joining, both for the keynote as well for a breakout session. So very interesting conference and a full day of expert insights, of networking with other users and developers all around both Microsoft BI as well as WhereScape. So highly recommended. After this meetup, I'll gonna set up the new meetup page where you can find all the information. So that will be part of the DACH user group as well. But in the end, to fully register, you need to go to makebi.ch. Then on November 6th, we will have a next, let's say, a regular meeting on a Wednesday afternoon starting at 4:30. We have currently one presentation. Let's say candidate is about how Helsana is using the 2-bit software in order to enable Git versioning with WhereScape Red. If you have any other ideas or maybe you know about a cool project or installation or solving how somebody solved a specific issue through WhereScape, let me know. And we are really happy to get your inputs and, of course, let's say participation. It doesn't need to be a 45-minute presentation all the time. Maybe it's just about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, even just proposing a certain question you would like to have discussed during such a meetup. So it's really a community meeting, which is based or lives from the input from the community members. Then it's already it's a bit strange to talk about Christmas when outside it's 35 degrees currently, but time is running fast and we said, okay, it's always a bit too much of things before Christmas, so let's already schedule the first event after Christmas, the end of January. So there we will follow up with our dinner, the joint user group dinner in Zurich, where we meet and just have a nice evening together discussing both WhereScape related topics, but as well other topics all around data. So you're going to find all that information. Maybe you can already do a save the date in your calendars and make sure you can attend. Then another insight or hint for a community, it's the BI Champions community. This community is more focusing on the cultural aspects and the education and training aspects all around data. So it's not, let's say, most or the main focus is not a technical focus, even though, for example, we have an event next Wednesday, which is about commenting and discussion threads in Power BI. So we also look at such things. But for example, in October, we're going to have a presentation about how to establish a data culture in a organization, which where we have a speaker from Munich, which or who does that in a very funny way, showing or using the data culture, combining the data culture with the storytelling of Lord of the Rings. So who wants to know why Sauron had a very bad data culture in his kingdom, in his dark kingdom? Have a look at the BI Champions event in October. As well in October, we have the TWI Data and Analytics Barcamp hosted in Zurich. So there, for those of you who are not familiar with what is a barcamp, the barcamp is a kind of a conference, so it's on site where there is no agenda, but the agenda is made by the participants in the first part of the meeting, and then we split up typically in 2, sometimes even 3 sessions and discuss whatever you bring along as questions or topics. So it's really driven by the people, and that's always very surprising how valuable and, let's say, as well again surprising such an evening can be. Based on my past experience, it's always worth the time to join there and discuss with others, where sometimes you meet people you never would have met if you just would do that by a plan. And so that's a very interesting format as well. And just one day later, on the 25th of October, there will be the Data Platform Conference. It's as well a community conference taking place again in Zurich. You see, even Switzerland is very Zurich oriented because it's rather in the middle of the country. And this is a day then more focusing on the Microsoft BI platform, etc. So that's it from the community news. I hope to see you at either WhereScape user group meetup or any other of these community events. If there aren't any questions so far, I just say thank you to the other presenters, Elgar and Endika. Thank you to Courtney, and in absence to Melissa, who helped us to set this up from a webinar perspective and providing us with the landing page, the whole registration process. So thanks a lot, everybody. You make this possible, and see you next time.
Cool.
Thanks for the applause. So let's see if Courtney takes us back behind the stage.